Breathing exercises for stress and anxiety. You've probably heard about breathing exercises for anxiety and stress. But unfortunately, not everyone understands how to use them to their maximum effectiveness. Watch this video to the end, and I will teach you how to properly apply breathing exercises to cope with anxiety, stress, and insomnia. Let's start with OZOV. Our ancestors didn't have abstract thinking before. There was a so-called first signal system which also occurs in animals, or rather they have it, which responds to external stress. Well, let's say a hare saw a wolf. The hare has a startle reaction, a release of stress hormones, and it starts to run away. Or a wolf saw another wolf and it starts to fight. In other words, a chase-escape battle. That is, in response to an external stimulus, there is a release of stress hormones, breathing accelerates, blood pressure rises, heart rate increases, the body prepares for work. But then we developed abstract thinking, and we started to think. And we have far fewer real stresses, no wolves are chasing us, we are not on the brink of starvation. At the same time, we can think about some problems. The body did not come up with any other reaction in response to minimal stress, exactly the same stress hormone release and exactly the same breathing, heartbeat, and blood pressure increase. But at the same time, you should not work out because a person just sits and thinks about it. What happens when a person's breathing speeds up? He is overwhelmed with oxygen and the level of carbon dioxide in the blood decreases. Contrary to what one might expect, a drop in blood carbon dioxide levels results in the loss of breath satisfaction. A person breathes and feels that he cannot breathe normally. It's as if the air doesn't get into the lungs. Or he tries to yawn, but he can't. What does one think? I'm not getting enough air. And they start breathing even more deeply. And 10 to 15 minutes of hyperventilation is enough. A person's head starts to spin. Flies start to darken before his eyes. A feeling of fear appears. There is a tremor in the body. This directly leads to a classic panic attack with fear of death, palpitations, and high blood pressure. This is the sequence of actions in the body of hormones, which leads to the development of a panic attack. Thus, hyperventilation in this situation is a negative factor, which can cause both anxiety and in fact provoke a panic attack. If you have ever felt dissatisfaction with your breath, or even more so if you have had a panic attack, give a like. By the way, you will find out how to effectively deal with this. Thus, breathing exercises, especially without physical exertion, are harmful to the body. The main task when a person has a feeling of dissatisfaction with the breath is to try to breathe slower and more superficially. Moreover, if this is not possible, you can simply take a paper bag and breathe into it. In films, particularly foreign ones, they frequently depict a person battling a panic attack. But, once again, if you have this feeling, you understand that you have overbreathed oxygen. And you need to limit ventilation as much as possible. You need to breathe slowly and superficially. Inhale a little, exhale a little, and don't breathe until you really want to. And such slow, superficial breathing for 3 to 4 minutes increases the level of carbon dioxide. A feeling of satisfaction appears with the inhalation. This is how you can easily cope with hyperinterracial syndrome. But why did I tell you all this? Because usually breathing techniques are all aimed at slowing down the breath. Actually, I once mentioned in another video that if we eat faster, it also stimulates our nervous system. When we breathe more often, something can trigger an increase in breathing, and frequent breathing itself further intensifies stress. That's why we need to slow down our breathing in breathing techniques.
They can be very different.
4, 7, 8. 4 seconds inhale, 7 seconds hold, and 8 seconds slow exhale. Or 4 seconds inhale, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds exhale, 4 seconds hold. Or even the simplest technique, 5-5. Inhale slowly on the count of 5, exhale slowly on the count of 5. We usually breathe somewhere around 8 to 12 times a minute. And if we breathe 5-5, that's already 6 breathing cycles per minute. And 4-7-8 is approximately 3 breathing cycles per minute. And if we consciously slow down our breathing, it reflexively slows down our brain.
We calm down, we hyperventilate less, and the person relaxes, calms down, and trembles less.
Overall, slowing down our breathing induces calmness in us. But there are two more elements of breathing techniques that also allow us to calm down better. I will demonstrate to you right now. One hand on my chest and the other on my stomach. This is known as abdominal breathing. The chest hand should remain mostly stationary while the stomach visibly inflates. The technique is the 4-7-8. I inhale for a 4 count. Notice the belly's expansion. So, puffing out the stomach as much as possible, holding for 7 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then through the tubes, through the pursed lips, I exhale like this. 1, 2, 3, notice I choose the stomach, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, first we breathe slowly, second we count. I will now explain this situation. And third, we breathe with the stomach, that is, we puff out the stomach on the inhale, then we draw it in. Recall, reducing breathing pace slows the situation, essentially mildly decelerating the brain. Next is the mathematical count. When we count, we can't think logically anymore, or we experience less emotions. Even, when you're upset or want to say something nasty to someone, they still say, take a slow breath in, breathe out, count to 3, or only then say something. That is, it's enough to calm down. So when we count, our brain also calms down because it experiences fewer emotions. Well, what else is extraordinarily important in relation to abdominal breathing? We have what is called the solar plexus here. In fact, these are the endings of the parasympathetic nerves, and we have a parasympathetic system. The activation of this parasympathetic system slows down a number of processes in the body. In particular, blood pressure decreases and heart rate slows down. And if we breathe in and out with our stomach, we are effectively massaging this area, irritating the so-called parasympathetic ganglia, and this reflexively also slows down our nervous system. So we get this triple effect. In principle, slowing down the breath and calming the nervous system, mathematical counting and reducing emotions, and massaging the corresponding zone of the solar plexus. And 5 minutes of such breathing is enough for the nervous system to relax sufficiently. A detailed description of this breathing technique and other relaxation techniques can be found in my mini book dedicated to stress and insomnia. The book's link is in the video description. There is one extremely important aspect that you need to consider when you are practicing breathing or other relaxation techniques. Sometimes there's a situation where a person says, I bought your book, read the relaxation technique, couldn't sleep, started applying it, woke up completely, got excited and couldn't sleep at all, and everything is terrible. Your technique doesn't work. But I'll tell you, if you've read some technique for the first time and started working it out when you already couldn't sleep, it will only further stimulate your brain because you're working it out. If you came, to a trainer and he showed some element to perform this element well, you need to repeat it 50 to 100 times. So the same thing with breathing techniques and other relaxation techniques. Firstly, you need to practice them not before sleep, when you can't fall asleep, but during the day. And repeat 50 to 100 times regularly. Usually it's 3 to 4 to 5 times a day. And somewhere after 2 or 3 weeks, the technique becomes automatic.
And in fact, you just start thinking about the breathing technique you will be performing, and your blood pressure is already dropping, your pulse is slowing down, and you start breathing slower.
Relaxation happens almost instinctively. And then, when the technique has been automated, you can use it when you can't fall asleep or wake up in the middle of the night and want to fall asleep quickly again. In my clinical practice, I use breathing techniques, but usually in combination with other relaxation methods or techniques. And maybe now I will tell you a simple enough program that allows you to relax better, experience less stress, and accordingly sleep better afterwards. First, the same breathing technique, I recommend patients to perform 5 times a day before breakfast, before lunch, before dinner. After some quiet time about this, I will also say a few words. and an hour before sleep. We repeat the technique 5 times, we learn it, we work it out, we bring it to perfection, and it starts to work reflexively. The next thing is this: slow food intake and slow chewing. In another video, I detailed this directly. Here, I will briefly say that we usually chew very quickly, about 20 times a minute, like a disco style. You need to consciously slow down the chewing process and chew somewhere at a speed of once per second. Think directly about yourself, how you chew. Slow chewing also reflexively slows down the brain. And it turns out that we first prepare ourselves for food intake, conducting breathing techniques. By the way, among other things, in many religions people pray before eating. In fact, they also to some extent relax and prepare themselves for food intake. So, breathing techniques, then slow food intake, preferably remove any gadgets to concentrate actually on the food. This is so-called mindfulness. It's focusing on the present, being here and now, not anywhere and sometime. And here a person is eating while watching an earthquake there. He gets an adrenaline rush, and instead of enjoying his meal, he worries about people being in an earthquake. And it's constant stress, and the person doesn't feel any pleasure, from eating. Next, regarding more time for relaxation. This is also such an interesting technique for laying off unpleasantness. You know, we can turn some problems into tasks. Well, for example, if a tooth hurts, I'll make an appointment with the dentist. But there is a problem, for example, with ongoing health issues. Or there are family issues, or financial problems that can't be clearly defined as a task. But it constantly swirls in the working memory. The person constantly experiences it but can't do anything about it. But this technique is also called Napoleon or Scarlett O'Hara. You can postpone this problem. That is, if you had the thought that you have no money and you couldn't write down for yourself whether I'll get a new job or go there to steal money. Yes, God forbid, of course. You can make a promise to yourself or decide to think about it during a time of tranquility. And I recommend my patients to set a day after work, for example, 1800 hours, 20 minutes when a person can relax. During the day, a thought came to him. He can't make a decision right now. He writes it down and opens a notepad or a smartphone and sees everything he wrote and can think for 20 minutes, what should I do? I don't have enough money? What should I do if there are problems in the family? What to do if issues arise with the kids? But these 20 minutes are over, you promise yourself, and I'll think about these problems tomorrow at 6 in the evening. That is, so that these problems do not constantly revolve in our working memory, but so that we can postpone them each time and think about them later.
I'll think about it tomorrow.
Here's Napoleon. When he went to bed, he imagined a chest of drawers with open drawers, and he put this matter in a drawer, at the level of consciousness, closed the chest of drawers, and said, I'll open you tomorrow. So, in my book on stress and insomnia, this technique is described in detail. You can read it and apply it. Moreover, I sometimes say, such impressive girls tell me, the doctor wrote down 10 terrible problems that disturb me. But at 6 in the evening, I open it and realize that 7 of them don't bother me at all anymore. That is, in this situation, you can completely forget about them and not worry at all. So if a girl kept these 10 problems in her mind all the time, she could become neurotic by the end of the evening and, of course, sleep poorly. That is, in general, once again, a whole set of such relaxation techniques allows us to relax very effectively and sleep better.